3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome back to Sparking Creativity, the Ethno-Arts podcast. I am your host, Justin, and today we have a special treat with another guest host talking about a very important topic that even one of our listeners had written to us last year wanting to know about this. So we're going to be talking about ethno-arts in deaf communities, and our special guest host today is Siew. Say hello, Siew. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Siew. I've been working alongside various deaf communities in the Asia Pacific, I think since 2010. And I learned a lot from them and also still learning. And I think my life has never been the same since then. And I do feel like I've become more and more creative. That's about me.
That's great. We're really grateful for your service to the deaf communities, but also for taking the time to help us to learn more about what things look like in their world, what ministry looks like, and in particular their creative expressions and how this field of ethno-arts applies to ministry amongst deaf communities. So maybe just we start out with what do we need to know about deaf communities? We'll just start there.
I think that the first thing that came into my mind was like, senses. If you know about senses, like see, hear, taste, touch, and etc., etc. And think about your life with all these senses and without one of them, like hearing. Mm-hmm. What would your life be? And I think I can't really speak. I'm not a professional and I'm not deaf, so I am just simply a hearing person working among the deaf community. So I could just share with you about my own experiences and what I learned from them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I generally would think about my own daily life, our daily life. Our lives are basically built upon what we can hear. Just a day, one day in your life. Think about what do you do? Washing machine. When it's done, probably there will be a beeping sound.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And when you're boiling the kettle, when it's done, there will be some kind of sound.
Right.
And your TV and your car honking, and even your doorbell. Mm-hmm. Somebody visit you, they press the doorbell, and you hear the sound, and your phone ringing, and etc., etc. But all these things are actually mean nothing to them, to the deaf. So deaf, depending on the visual. And their lives pretty much built around what they can see, and what they can touch. So, for example, doorbell, there will be no sound with the doorbell, but it's connecting to a light. So when you press the doorbell and the light came on in a house, when they see the light blinking, they know that someone is out there. And while phone ringing, well, they can't hear. So it's basically a lot of time is vibration mode. Or there is a gadget that, there will be a lighting blinking on the phone and stuff like that. So it's touch and see. So this is what I felt like, what I know about the deaf when I work with them. And I remember that one time somebody asked me, say in a hotel, would I be willing to share a room with my deaf colleagues? Then I say that I'm so sensitive to sound. And my colleague would be so sensitive to light. If in the middle of the night I want to go to the bathroom and I turn on the light, what would happen? So this is actually very different. So think about all the difference that between, one person can see without hearing and one person can hear without seeing. What are the lives like? Yeah. And another thing that I would really like us to know is that, majority of the deaf growing up in the hearing families, basically they are one deaf in the family. So, and sometimes you think about, growing up, being deprived of language and also deprived of communication and being deprived of expression and some information. And think about all those things. If you don't have all those things, what will happen to you? So a lot of times the deaf, at least this is what I know, when they meet with other deaf, they would really excited, life become much more meaningful to them, and they could even chat for a long time, for hours and hours and hours, and time becomes like irrelevant to them. Yeah, those are the little things that mm, yeah, would like just this is my experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
so many things that we take for granted, uh,
hmm
with
Yeah.
and how, even just as you say it, there are so many things that we rely on the sound for,
hmm
um,
Yeah.
and even with podcasts or radio, and how you spend your time while driving, or it's such a huge part of
hmm
everyday life that, um, it's just I have no category or a box to put that in my mind to really understand what that might be
hmm
like. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, how would they? I mean, we know that there's sign language, but can you talk about just communication between deaf people?
Mm. Uh, well, we all know that sign languages themselves are language, a
Mm-hmm.
true language. So there is a language. They do communicate with sign language, but um, we hearing could probably just hear without seeing a person, and just hear the voice, maybe the tone of voice. We knowing that that person might be angry or not angry
Mm-hmm.
or peace or happy, whatever. So the deaf, it has to be very visual because the sign language is not just about signing only. It's visual. That means that you are also including what you can see on the face of a person
Hmm.
and the body gesture and the movement, which means that the rhythm of the hands, like fast, intense, slow, soft, and all those things, and your body language and everything that you can see from here. Sorry, I wish this is a video recorded,
Right.
but from your head,
Mm-hmm.
the top of your head to the chest here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, where you could, yeah. So they see this part here,
That's
this
like
the whole
the
thing here.
frame. That's where they're all the communication is happening in that window.
Yeah,
Their
in
hands
that
stay
window.
generally within that box.
Not just that box. It's actually the face,
Mm-hmm.
your eye movement,
Right.
and your mouth, and your facial expression, your skin,
Hmm.
and your body, how you move it, and direction and everything, and location. So it's all in here. You're basically watching the TV.
Hmm.
So the communication has to be with something that include the whole person. It's not just one aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well.
I remember that one time when I was at the airport. This is actually I was trying with a deaf, and we were at a different gate. So she went into the gates, and I was actually not yet, still waiting in the somewhere up there. But we could see each other. We can't definitely people cannot talk to each other because it's like there's a separation between us.
Hmm.
So when I was upstairs and she was downstairs, but we can see each other, we could just sign and communicate from far.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this is something that the hearing person might not be able to do. Yeah, except probably shouting, I'm not sure, but yeah. So, in terms of communication, I think one of the things that we need to think about, there shouldn't be any blockage.
Mm-hmm.
So, think of, you know, maybe we can also think about our home here, our bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
My bedroom is, or if I were to close up the window and my door, nobody could see me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I could communicate with voice.
Right.
However, for the deaf, this is impossible. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. So there's just a whole other world that they get to experience, and a lot of our listeners are either in ministry or they're supporting ministry in some way, and so I know that they would be curious to know is how being deaf impacts their spiritual life, and what are the options for them, as far as going to church or, um,
Mm.
worship, interacting with scripture. Can you share a bit about that?
Um, yeah, I think one of the things I want to point out Well, this is just my experience visiting the churches and visiting the deaf ministry in the church. I actually attended a few um, times with the deaf in a hearing church. And I do find that this is just my own observation. So a lot of times the service is always interpreted, even including the song. So when they were singing the hearing song. Yeah, this is a hearing language, a spoken language song. And but we know that sign language has a different grammatical structure. That's one. And another one is that the deaf could not hear the rhythm. They can't hear the rhythm. They have no idea how your rhythm flow because the music, even the music is being played. And when the interpreter interpret, the unfortunate part of this interpreter is that I think this is nobody's fault. It's just probably the society is built in such a way that we don't have the capacity to build up interpreters, and the interpreter wouldn't know how. The interpreter would just sign according to what she sees on the screen, the words. And for some deaf who can read, they probably would follow the word and just sign it. But the rhythm is actually very off, different from what we hearing would have. And simply because it's difficult for them to follow the rhythm. And also the rhythm is not their rhythm, it's our hearing rhythm. We hearing has a different rhythm from the deaf. And so a lot of times I think a lot of deaf would sign the song without feeling what it is. And some probably don't even understand what it means. And of course, some would know, but there were very few of them would understand. And and how this would affect their spiritual life, probably you could imagine. And even in the interpreted service, like the pastor would speak, a chunk of message, and you have an interpreter. And if the interpreter is so skilled and so good, she could probably interpret 100% to the audience, to the deaf audience. However, most of our interpreters are not as skilled, and so they would actually try to pick out what is easy, what they can understand and translate meaningfully, some of them. And so whatever the message then be passed on would be reduced to a lot, actually. Another thing is, actually, this is very interesting, is that I actually attended one deaf church. This is really a deaf preaching. It really imprinted in my mind. Now, this is in somewhere far away, I think in America. I still remember the church is in Dallas. Yeah. So, and I was actually sitting there looking at the interaction. The pastor was preaching. He is actually very theatrical. He was preaching a good message, but he has a lot of movement there, and there's some kind of performance to help the audience. I mean, to help us. Another thing is that sometimes when a pastor says something difficult, and the audience wouldn't understand, and this pastor is very, very, very sensitive to the reaction of the audience. The facial reaction, and also sometimes the deaf will sign certain things, like, okay, maybe I don't really understand, what does it mean, So the pastor, whoever preached on the pulpit, would actually quickly catch that. So there's some interaction there, actually. So, but for us hearing, we probably would just preach without nonstop. We cannot interrupt the pastor even if you don't understand. So there are a lot of things like I keep thinking about like our hearing is very one way. I sit there and pastor just preach and just throw the message at me. Nothing wrong with that. This is the culture, probably traditional way, I'm not sure. But for some community, it is actually the two-way is needed. It's actually communication. I mean, I think even when God talk to us, it's a communication. It's two-way. It's not just one way throwing things at me. So, yeah.
So there's even just that. I'm just trying to think of what are the things that we can do to make more space in churches. If in hearing churches, if they're sharing space with deaf people in the congregation, it seems like you really need to be a little more flexible in giving the message, having some space for that interaction or back and forth, or maybe even preaching a little slower so the interpreter has time to keep up.
Mm. I would I personally think that the best way is to raise up deaf pastor.
Mm.
That's the most important to be to give the leadership to opportunity for a deaf person to
Mm-hmm.
lead. And we can't say that this person is not good enough or whatever, but I think it's always a, a good thing to think about, raising up someone who can communicate so well with the deaf community and able to pass on what God wants them to know. And another thing is actually there's actually there are also good things about hearing churches, because there's also like we call it like a Bible study group.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the church service. Outside of the service, you have a group of people coming together, and there would be a deaf group here.
Mm-hmm.
So if the deaf group here, and if the leaders would allow the deaf to take charge, that would be so great.
Mm-hmm.
So how to do it their way, and not necessarily that, okay, we're hearing this is the one that we need to do and you must do all these things. And but they are not hearing. They have their own way of doing things. So it would be good for us to think about letting them do things their way, and trusting the Lord will lead them. I think a lot of times we don't trust. We think that people are not good enough. We don't trust that they're able to do whatever. Yeah. So if God is so big and so powerful, how can I not trust that He could do all this, even with the weakest person in the world?
Mm.
Yeah. So.
That's great. So, what about some ministry amongst deaf communities, and what does that look like? That you, whether your ministry or other ministries that you're aware of, what does that look like?
Uh, there are a lot of deaf ministries. I mean, I really can't. Mm. So among the hearing world, I mean, like social ministry. I think this is what I know. I can't really speak for other country, but
Sure.
in the countries that I know of, is that the hearing church would have a ministry, so they pocket under social ministry. So this is like an outreach ministry
Mm-hmm.
for the deaf or for other people's group or something like that. So what are they look like? I think a lot of times um, I'm hearing person, so I can speak negatively about myself. So I think we impose. A lot of time we impose because we have an agenda, we know what to do, and we say that this is the way, and then we put all this onto, okay, you go and do this.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times probably we have not really think about, let's learn, come and teach me about you. Come and teach me your language. Come and teach me your culture. What do you need? What are your ways? How do you do these things? Come and teach me. I think we have not really think about that part. Yeah, that someone whom we think is probably lesser than us to teach us. So maybe for me, I have to humble myself. Come and teach me, your way. What would you do with this? How would you change this? So those are the things. Another thing I think, a lot of times we felt that because deaf live in the culture, for example, Malaysian deaf. So they live in Malaysia and I'm Malaysian, so we are of the same culture. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
we would say that. But actually, the culture is very different. So the culture is not based on the culture traditional culture that we know of. The culture is based on the daily life. Our daily life is very, very different. Like we said, like we just talked about before, that our life is built on what we hear and their life is built on what they see. So come to think about, if the world just built on visual only and touch, how would the culture be like
Mm-hmm.
here? And and we have to learn. I have to learn from them. And I think the deaf has been learning from the hearing world because it's been imposed upon them. They have no
Mm-hmm.
choice sometimes. Yeah. So there are a lot of issues that I personally think that, we our assumption, like we know that no assumption of knowing, even though we think that we know the culture and this is deaf, but we probably see deaf as a disability rather than a culture.
Mm.
Because this is how we categorize them, even our in a country, in any country, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly
So
here in America, that's the way it's been.
mhm, yeah. So 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 how ministry is like, I think it's a bit difficult for me to say, depending on the leaders who are probably sensitive to the deaf culture, and they might do things very differently. And some might be thinking that, I'm good. I have a very good agenda. I want good for them. So what is good for me is not necessarily good for them. So
Mm-hmm.
we probably miss that too. Yeah. I think for myself, I'm actually very privileged to be able to work with the deaf, to in many ways. In Bible translation, I learned so much from them. It's just amazing. It's just changed the way I look at things, and also changed the way I look at the Bible. The Bible becomes more alive, I think, because I see it now no longer as flat. I'm actually seeing the Bible as something that I can actually imagine things are happening. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like a movie. So it's very different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I'm not sure if I answered the question. So
yeah. I think,
mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously our listeners are of hearing community, but if any of them are working with deaf communities, it's in that kind of hearing coming and trying to help and support deaf communities in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about in deaf communities and what their ministry to each other looks like, or deaf churches, and maybe share a bit about that.
Um, I think there are some deaf churches, at least what I know of. Um, well, I work with various deaf, and then there is a deaf pastor that I know of who's actually running a deaf church in some part in Japan. And of course, there so what the ministry is like, I think I'm not very clear because I don't know. But I know from what he shared, he felt that, you know, things that we do, for example, arts, ethno arts, how deaf worship in a deaf way,
Mm-hmm.
and the difference between the words and also the words, meaning that, the song or the hearing song, and also the deaf song, so-called deaf song. And there's another important thing, is that the trauma healing, arts and trauma healing, that one is so powerful that he felt it's actually very good
Hmm.
for his congregation. And well, he attended one of our workshops on arts and trauma healing. So I think a lot of times I only see the ministry that's been led by hearing,
Mm-hmm.
and less by the deaf. So there are a lot of good people, hearing people out there. I think they try their best to learn sign language. I
Mm-hmm.
even know someone who actually was a was a hearing person but have a heart for the deaf, and his signing is really good. Yeah, he was able to communicate with the deaf very well,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he's really really wanted to serve the deaf. And so there are a lot of people. There's still a lot of people who has a good intention, very very good intention, and also knowing that, I need to learn their language and understand who they are, in order for me to minister to them. So there are some people like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great way to think of it, and we and all of what we are talking about on this podcast and in those working in ethno arts are thinking about cross cultural situations. And I imagine the same principles apply. Like you said, you can learn their sign language in order to communicate. There are things that you can learn about their daily life and their culture,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
um, and 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 here we're particularly interested in arts, and I think in thinking of how other people are working in ethno arts, they are also trying to equip people from the communities and train
Mm-hmm.
them and equip them to do what God has led them to do, and how God
Mm-hmm.
has gifted them to do it. So I appreciate that
Mm-hmm.
that connection there for
Mm-hmm.
us, that it would be the same, and viewing it as
Yeah.
a cross cultural situation. That makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So
Yeah.
speaking of arts, let's talk a bit about that. First of all, I guess we haven't really talked about sign languages in general, we talk we've talked about how arts are not universal languages,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wondering, we know that there's multiple or hundreds of sign languages, right? Do you know the number of sign languages in the world?
Well, according to the uh, ethnologue, it's probably 400 something, but
Mm-hmm.
these are all documented. They are also non-documented, so I'm not sure
Okay.
that
So at
400
least
something.
more than
Yeah,
400.
yeah.
And so what
Mm-hmm.
about what do arts look like and artistic expression in deaf communities? You mentioned song, but
Mm-hmm.
that would be song in a different way than the hearing community would think of it. So a different category.
Yeah. Um, well, when you say arts are not universal languages, and yet it is also universal in some way,
Right.
because art is easily communicate without even words. So there's a very, I think universal, non-universal is not clear. It depends on what it is. I think it's the same among the deaf. There's something that's universal. There's also something that's not universal. And I think it's the same with the hearing because it's the environment that we are it's the environment of upbringing, where we were brought up, in what country we are brought up, and what influences us, the society that we're in, and all those things applies to the deaf as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of things. Even for the deaf, when you talk about rhythm, let's say um, Myanmar deaf and a Thai deaf and American deaf, the way they sing a song, let's say they move the body. The way they move their body might be very different. The
Mm-hmm.
mannerism is different because the culture is different. So I know that Malaysian deaf, when they move, even when they clap their hand, and the Thai deaf clap their hands, it's very different.
Hmm.
So the mannerism of presenting it is different. Yeah. And another thing is that I think one of the deaf made a remark um, at a conference the other day to say that, well, we keep singing, like, this and this, clap your hand, and then move your body left and right, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then suddenly she said something, who is to say that this is the deaf way?
Hmm.
So we don't know because this is how we do it, even for the hearing, isn't it? So this is
That's
what
right.
they see. But in order to feel the rhythm, you have to swing your body. So, well, who is to say that we have to swing our body left and right? So, what is the deaf way? I think the best people to answer, actually, I was thinking about this morning too. I wish I could have called a deaf to be to the podcast with me,
Mm-hmm.
so that, and this podcast would be a audio recording rather than a video. I mean, a video
Video.
recording rather than
Yeah.
an audio recording, so that you can see. And I think there are a lot of things that we think about. The song must be in a certain way, and the rhythm must be in a certain way, but it may not necessary for the deaf. It is because song is simply an expression. If it's an expression and communicating to what is in your heart and worshiping the Lord, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I think the deaf can have their own respective rhythm because we can't define what is art and we cannot define what is poem, and it's difficult to define what is a song because different culture has a different definition of all those things. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I may not be able to answer your questions. I mean, I think like I say, arts, yes, it's not universal languages, but yet it is also universal,
Mm-hmm.
depending on, you know um, simply because we are all very different. Yeah,
Right.
different
They
culture.
certainly
Mm-hmm.
exist everywhere. Like you said, it might be different and how that looks and what the
Mm-hmm.
movements might be, but and what
Yeah,
that's communicating from culture to culture.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so I know you have a story to share from your experience. I just wanted to let people know that we're going to put a link in our show notes for a video presentation about deaf communities and ethno arts, and it also talks about trauma healing. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a presentation that was given at the Global Consultation on Arts and Music in Missions.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about that on previous episodes, and we'll put that up, and you can learn some more for yourself and actually get to see it. That's the, like you said, the problem with an audio podcast. So we're going to put this up so people can watch and get to see what that looks like there. So so what we'll just let you go ahead and end our time with your story for us.
Okay. Maybe I can just point out a few things on the presentation.
Sure.
You probably will see 3 presentations of an art form by Myanmar, Thai, and Japanese. So you could actually see what are the difference. And of course, these are various forms, but take note of the mannerism of presenting it. It's not the form that you see, it's the movement, how they actually move themselves, and what are the things that you can see that makes them look different. And I just want to give an example. I think this just came into my mind is that if you know, okay, there's a time, and one art form is very, very popular. We call it vernacular visual, VV, vernacular visual. That's quite popular. And it's basically you actually sort of like you become, I mean, depending on, you become the subject itself. Yes, and how you move things, it's really powerful. I think a lot of deaf liked it. Now, the thing is that one day I was in this country. I'm not supposed to mention the name of the country.
Sure.
And somebody sent a video on the phone, and then we were watching it. Oh, this is really good, really good. Then I asked the deaf, yeah, it's so good. So I asked them, how do you feel? This is not from my country. Even the face is, I know the person, the deaf. It's not because of the art form. It's because the way they presented, the person who signed it, is signed in a way that looks like a American deaf, I think. Yeah, it's the sign. I mean, when you look at it, put an American deaf and a Japanese deaf together, the way they signing the same thing, and maybe the manner of presenting it very different.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I just want to, point that out, that you can actually maybe observe that, what are the different in the mannerism.
Great. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So for the story, I think this is a story that I personally felt really powerful to me as well. And I think I learned a lot. It's because of everybody knows what happened in Myanmar. And especially, I think it was like beginning of last year. There was a political coup. And obviously the deaf would prefer, was sort of like, suddenly things change, life change. And there was a lot of distress among them. And at the same time, we were all, during the pandemic, we were all like housebound. So we use a lot of Zoom and do translation work. So then I think we meet every week. And at that point, I realized that their face were really downcast. That the deaf couldn't hide their feeling. I mean, it shows on their face. And knowing the context, we know that, you're housebound because of pandemic, and also with all these political changes in the country, which is not so welcomed by majority. And we have to stop somewhere and ask, what's going on. And so the deaf actually talk about, well, I can't do what the people are doing now on the street, but I want to. And another thing is that I'm a Christian. Am I supposed to do that or not? Because my church is telling me, no, you pray, you just pray. But I wanted to go out because my deaf friend saying that you don't love your country. So, and my deaf friend say that you're Christian, blah, blah, blah. I feel really sad. What can I do to show that I also love my country? And another thing is that I have a lot of anger in me bottling up. What should I do with those things? So we talk about arts. And I think that one of the things that we talk about is that, that there are a lot of other ways to protest, to show you're not agreeing to what's happening. There are many, many ways. One of the best ways is actually arts. So I give them some example, and they were really amazed. Okay, I can do that, yes. And we use one because at the time, one of the deaf were translating Psalm 4. No, I think it's Psalm 4. Was it Psalm 4? Asking God, why
Mm-hmm.
these things, like the anger, expressing the anger towards God. And they ask, can we do that? Can we tell God we're angry with you? You're not answering our prayer. So why not? Because the Bible has the example of that,
Mm-hmm.
especially in Psalms. And then the thing is that how would they express it? I think this is my learning point. I have to ask them, how would you do it? What are the things that you would do to have rhythm, to be impactful and things like that? So they told me what all this. And then, after they tell me all this, so I said, let's do this. Let's just think about it, and do it, and do a short one. Tell God your feelings, like anger. They actually did an amazing job. It's poem, and they do arts and drawing,
Mm-hmm.
and those were powerful. And I think because of all this outlet, and then they post some of the stuff on the Facebook, and the friends stopped sort of like pestering them or condemning them, and they say, oh wow, this is how I feel, I feel the same, this is how I feel. And then they want to do more. So this is really amazing, I think. Yeah, art is really, yeah, I mean, I'm thankful that God gave us this thing called arts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's so great, and such a good example in giving others permission to voice those
Mm-hmm.
feelings towards God. That it's okay to have these, what some people would say are negative feelings, and we can't show that or express that, but being able to direct it to God. I'm so grateful for the examples in the
Mm-hmm.
Psalms of
Yeah.
that, and understanding that God is big enough to take those, and He loves us and
Mm-hmm.
understands. And
Yeah.
of all people to be angry and upset and confused when there is a coup going on, and so many awful things all around, I just can't
Mm-hmm.
imagine. And
Yep.
and
Yeah.
how yeah, how did that feel for them after they were able to express that and get those feelings out in that way?
It was really amazing that they felt like, oh wow, this is something that I can do. I felt like, I'm at peace. And when they're at peace, they start thinking about the goodness of God.
Mm.
This is really interesting. So I think the subsequent poem or song that they presented is like, they're angry at God and asking God why all these things. And towards the end, they say that we know that you are with us because of what the Bible said. Not just what the Bible said. They've been translating stories. So they even sing, okay, this is what you have done for Moses,
Mm.
like
Mm-hmm.
for the Israelites. Those are the things that they're starting to remember. Okay, yeah, this is what I have been. This is what God has done, and even think about their own life. All this while, the goodness that God has God has brought to them. So I think when they are able to think, I think after those expressions, they were able to refocus. Yeah. So this is very interesting for me because um, I didn't realize that, um, if I'm not sure, I some of the videos might be on the Facebook. I don't use Facebook, so I don't know. But some of the videos is so intense and powerful that, even when I saw it, I cried. It's
Mm.
just so powerful and intense and so honest. And even after that, so this person or these people, they were able to really think about, uh, you know, uh, hanging on the hope, hope with
Mm-hmm.
God and hope in God. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's so great. And grateful for technology and platforms like Zoom where you can connect with
Yeah.
people. And do,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
do deaf people like to use Zoom? I imagine it's good that you can see people, but I don't know how well you're able to see everything that you need to see when communicating with each
I
other.
think I think that like visual. So we use Zoom basically for working but in a general communication, they send video messages
Mm-hmm.
to each other. I think, but one of the challenges that I have with some of with the deaf in Myanmar is actually that they, because of the changes in the country, there's a limitation about how much they could use. They could be online. So when you Zoom, they depend on the mobile data that they have. So sometimes it's not very stable, and also the mobile data is really extremely expensive these days in their country.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, deaf like it. So when I communicate with them, I use Telegram, because Telegram has this button, just touch, and then I could just video record myself and send a video message to them. So yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for that. I know that you need to go, and we can wrap up now, but are there any other things that you want to say? Any closing thoughts or things that you feel like hearing people should know about deaf people or how we can support them?
I think other than supporting them in prayer, it would be good if you know of any ministry that needs support. I hate to talk about money, but it is a reality. So yes, and if you're able to, you have the means, maybe you could support the deaf ministries financially and praying. And if you are available as physically, then it would be good for I don't want to say for us to learn the language and to learn first, humble enough to learn from them before we tell them what to do. So we want to work alongside and not in front of them, but walking alongside them. Yeah.
That's a great image, to be next to them and walk by them. Thank you. So we're going to put up some other links as well to have some more examples from some. We have, I think, a song and a poem from Myanmar that we'll put up there as well, so you can get to see some of this and see what their expressions look like, whether you can understand it or not. But I think I like your invitation to try to see what you might be able to pick up and how they might be different from the others that we watch.
Yeah. So, and I think see it with your feelings. Don't think about what you can understand or not understand. I mean, you try not to use your right brain too much. That's what I would say. Yeah.
That sounds good. Great. Well, thank you, Sue. We're so grateful for you being here and for sharing. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you that giving me the platform to share.
Absolutely.
And thank you.
Yep. And if any of our listeners have more questions, or you have your own stories and examples, if you have ministries that you are aware of that are working with the deaf, then please send that our way so we can share, and we'll pass that along. And until next time, I don't know when next time will be, but thank you for your patience as we put these out as we're able, and we'll see you sometime in the near future, Lord willing. So until then, we encourage you to go and spark some creativity wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. We would love to hear what you thought.
What resonated with you today? What questions did this raise? Anything you'd like to learn more about? Maybe you have stories you'd like to share.
Please feel free to contact us at ethnoartspod@gmail.com or follow us on Facebook and Instagram at ethnoartspod.
We also invite you to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. This will help others to find out about the show. Please feel free to share the podcast with others.
We look forward to sharing more with you next time on Sparking Creativity, the Ethno Arts Podcast.